Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are going to get started here in about 10 minutes, but before we do, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items with those of you that have come into the room. For those of you that we do already have in the room, the first thing I would like to make mention of is our chat pod, which is located on the left-hand side of your screen marked chat. This chat pod will be the best way to communicate with us if you have any questions regarding today's material. All questions pertaining to the material will be retained, and then we will have a short Q&A after each presentation, and then we will also have a large roundtable Q&A discussion after all of our presenters have finished their presentations for the day. This chat pod is also the best way to communicate with us should you experience any technical issues. If you do have any technical issues, please make sure to let us know there in the chat pod, and either myself or one of our customer service representatives will make sure to get you taken care of. All of your audio for today's webinar is going to be streaming through your computer speakers. So if at any point of today's webinar you either lose your live audio or your live video feed, The first thing we would like for you to do to troubleshoot is simply refresh your web browser and then hit your play button again on the live feed window, and this should refresh your audio and video connection. If for some reason this does not work, then again, feel free to use the chat pod to let us know you're experiencing technical issues. Also, we do have our toll-free number as well as our email address directly above the live feed window, should you want to contact us that way with any technical issues. Throughout today's event, we also are going to be using closed captions. You will find those directly below the live feed window. So if you would like to follow along in the closed captions area as well, you can feel free to do so. As with all of our webinars, we do like to find out a little bit more about our audience. A few of you have already done so, but for those of you that have not, if you could take a few moments just to type in your location there in the chat pod, that'll give us some great feedback about our audience, as well as the kind of reach we were able to make with today's webinar. Just so everyone is aware, we do have over 1,000 people that have registered for today's event. We have a massive crowd. We are extremely excited about the presentations today, and we would love to hear your feedback and your questions for the presenters throughout today's event. So make sure you do utilize the chat pod to do that. We've got about 6 minutes before we get started, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll mute my line back for now. We'll come on once more to go through housekeeping, and then we're going to get started promptly at the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us today. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are going to get started here in just a few minutes, but before we do, I would like to go over just a few housekeeping items with those of you that have just come into the room. For those of you that have just joined us, the first thing I would like to make mention of is our chat pod, which is going to be located on the left-hand side of your screen marked chat. This chat pod is going to be the best way to communicate with us should you have any questions regarding today's material. All questions pertaining to the material will be retained until the Q&A session. We will have a short one after each presentation, and then we will have a large roundtable style Q&A discussion after all three of our presenters have finished for the day. So please feel free at any point of today's presentation to go ahead and type in your questions there in the chat pod. We would hate for you to forget them, and then again, we will make sure that we get them, as many of them asked of our presenters as possible. Now, this chat pod is also the best way to communicate with us should you experience any technical issues. If you do have any technical issues, please make sure to let us know there in the chat pod, and either myself or one of our customer service representatives will make sure to get you taken care of. All of your audio for today's webinar is going to be streaming through your computer speakers. So if at any point of today's live event you either lose your audio connection or your live video feed, the first thing we would like for you to do to troubleshoot is going to be simply refresh your web browser that you're viewing the live event in, and then hit the play button again on your live event window. This should refresh your audio as well as your live video feed. If for some reason this does not work, or you experience any other technical issues, again, please let us know in the chat pod, or you can also utilize the toll-free number and the email address that we have located directly above the live feed window. Also below the live feed window, you will see currently we have closed captions that are running. They will be running throughout the entire presentation and webinar today. So if you would like to follow along with the captions, please feel free to do so there. As with all of our webinars, we always like to find out a little more about our audience and where everyone is coming to. So if you have not done so yet, if you could please go ahead and type in your location there in the chat pod, and that'll give us some great feedback about our audience as well as where everyone is joining us from today. We have plenty of people that have went ahead and typed in their location, and we have attendees all throughout the United States. I'm seeing almost every state represented, and this is fantastic. We do have over 1,000 people that have registered for today's event, our largest event that we have ever hosted. So finding out where everyone is joining us from today is extremely helpful in showing us the reach that we are able to obtain with our webinars. It is the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and switch some things up on my end, and then we will get started here momentarily. Thank you for joining us today. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Josh Vickers, and I'm with RTI International's Forensic Technology Center of Excellence. Today's webinar is going to be entitled Marijuana or Hemp from Farm Bill to Forensic Analysis. We do have three fantastic presenters today. Our webinar is scheduled for 2 hours, so we'll be able to get you a lot of information about today's topic from different views in the hemp and marijuana forensic industry. So we do have three presenters today. We're going to introduce each individually before their presentation. Our first presenter in today's webinar is going to be Ms. Renee Johnson. She is an agricultural policy specialist at the Congressional Research Service. Her work at CRS covers a range of agricultural and food production issues, including food safety regulation, as well as farm production and marketing of specialty crops, organic foods, and industrial hemp. She has worked on periodic Farm Bill legislation dating back to the 1990s across a range of professional capacities within both the private and public sector. Prior to joining CRS in 2006, she worked as an industry market consultant government contractor, academic researcher, and as a policy analyst within the federal government. She has a Master's of Science in Agricultural Economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a bachelor's from the University of California, Berkeley. Just our quick disclaimer before we get started, the opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. Any products and manufacturers discussed are presented for informational purposes only and do not constitute product approval or endorsement by the U.S. Department of Justice. And now, without any further ado, I would like to hand things over to our first presenter of the day, Miss Renee Johnson. Renee?
Hello, everyone. I don't see my slides yet. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Renee, you'll need to toggle back to your web browser and then hit your share button. That way you're sharing your screen. Currently, my screen is still shared.
Bear with me here. So you're not seeing my, we had my slides up.
Yes, but I took control back over the screen. So just go back to your Chrome web browser.
Yeah. Apologies.
No worries.
That would take me outside.
You might need to minimize your PDF for right now, just to go back to your web browser. All right, looks like it's coming up now. Okay, we're able to see your screen.
Okay, there we go. Yes or no?
Looks like we're just seeing the Word document right now with your
The PDF document?
With your folder open.
Sorry. Yep.
No worries.
Because I see it on my screen, but you don't see it on your screen?
No, it might be on your other screen. You might have to, there you go. Yeah, it might be on your, if you're using the dual monitor, we're only seeing your desktop now with
my little camel art. Okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Okay,
perfect.
So it's only going to work on the screen. Okay. It was the screen. Sorry about that, everyone. Apologies for the delay. This is Renee Johnson, and I work at the Congressional Research Service. CRS is part of the Library of Congress and one of the federal agencies in the legislative branch. CRS serves the U.S. Congress exclusively, providing research and analysis on a range of policy issues, including hemp and cannabis issues more broadly. So, by way of kicking things off today, did I move my slide forward, Josh? Did it move forward?
Yes, we're seeing the agenda now.
Perfect. Thank you. As a way of kicking things off, my main role is to provide an overview of U.S. hemp policy, focusing on changes enacted by the U.S. Congress in the 2018 Farm Bill, which built on changes enacted in the 2014 Farm Bill. These changes effectively allowed for the growing of hemp, which saw a nearly 60-year period when there was no hemp production in the United States, and all hemp sold in the United States was imported mostly from Canada and China. But before we get started, I think it's important to nail down certain terms and definitions, especially since this is more of a technical crowd and perhaps less familiar with U.S. farm policy. In particular, so what do we mean when we say the Farm Bill? This means the periodic omnibus multi-year law governing USDA food programs, and it provides Congress with an opportunity to comprehensively address agricultural and food issues, and is typically renewed about every 5 years. And there's been about 17 farm bills dating back to the 1930s. So regarding hemp, there were provisions involving hemp enacted in both the 2014 and the 2018 farm bills. So when we're talking about the 2014 Farm Bill, this refers to how Congress established an agricultural pilot program allowing hemp cultivation under specific conditions, mostly for research purposes, and only in states where production is legal, which means that, hemp remained illegal at the federal level and in interstate commerce. So when we switched to the 2018 Farm Bill, this refers to how Congress took further steps to remove hemp as defined in law from the definition of marijuana, which is also defined in law, to make it no longer a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law and subject to DEA oversight and regulation. In the Farm Bill, Congress also created a USDA administered hemp program to oversee and regulate hemp production. And under this framework, hemp cultivation must be conducted under an approved state or tribal plan or under license from USDA in order to be considered a lawful business. And these state plans must cover various grower requirements, including procedures for testing and sampling, as well as lots of other requirements that are kind of outside the scope of today's discussion. But one aspect of the law that I will mention is that USDA is also required to report any hemp production without a license to the U.S. Attorney General, among other information sharing requirements to U.S. law enforcement. So among the primary challenges of USDA's new regulation is the testing and forensic analysis of hemp to differentiate hemp and marijuana, particularly regarding measuring THC concentrations in the plant material. As you know, THC refers to the psychoactive compound present in both hemp and marijuana and the cannabis sativa plant more generally. Issues involving sampling and testing hemp is what we will be discussing today. And these issues are important because it's critical to distinguish hemp from marijuana, since each are separately defined in U.S. law and subject to different regulations and oversight. Also, any cannabis that does not meet the legal definition of hemp, which is based off a THC threshold established in law, remains a Schedule I controlled substance and generally regarded as an illegal substance. So this slide provides a graphic of the rough timeline of events that occurred and the evolution of how we got to where we are today. I'm not going to focus on everything that happened, kind of focusing on the stuff that's highlighted in red. Some of you may not realize that back in the day, during the two world wars and colonial times, hemp was grown for use as paper, rope, and fabric. And in the 1900s, up until the late 1950s, hemp was widely regarded as a basic agricultural commodity and supported by USDA, similar to other cultivated grains and also cotton. But starting in the late 1930s through to the 1950s and the 1970s, hemp became wrapped up in U.S. efforts to regulate controlled substances, including marijuana. And because hemp is of the cannabis sativa plant, which also includes marijuana, it became no longer legal to grow hemp under federal law, namely the Controlled Substances Act, or the CSA, which considered at the time all cannabis to be a Schedule I controlled substance, including hemp. So during that time, the last known USDA record of agricultural production of hemp was 1958. That's the last one I'm able to find. Then the period leading up to the 2014 Farm Bill saw a number of efforts trying to bring hemp back into the fold of USDA, mostly through industry court challenges and introduced legislation in the U.S. Congress. Starting in the late 1990s, a series of court cases involving two North Dakota farmers that had been approved to grow hemp in their state were unable to do so because of the CSA, which regulates cannabis at the federal level. There were also court cases challenging DEA efforts to block hemp imports for food because of concerns about possible THC levels. Also during this time, Canada legalized its hemp production, subject to regulation, and Canada became the largest exporter of hemp to the United States, mostly for use in food manufacturing. And then around this time, I should also mention that in the 1990s, several states changed their laws to allow for hemp cultivation and research within their own borders. But again, because of the constraints of the CSA restricting it at the federal level, there was no legal production in states, despite state laws that would have allowed them to do so. So in 2005, Representative Ron Paul from Texas introduced the first in a series of bills that would carve out hemp from the CSA based on a statutory definition of 0.3% THC. And this same language eventually made it into the 2018 Farm Bill, and the reason we're having this discussion today. In 2005, it didn't really seem to go, it didn't appear to go very far, and it was followed by a series of reintroductions in subsequent Congresses and the introduction of the bill in the Senate in 2012, along with other bills regarding hemp, including in 2014, House and Senate introduced legislation that would expand the use of hemp as quote-unquote therapeutic hemp to build on possible applications in the wellness and medicinal markets. So then during the debate of the 2014 Farm Bill during conference, Congress inserted language kind of at the last minute. A lot of people didn't anticipate it, that enacting a law to create a pilot program for hemp, shifting oversight to the states. However, it was still illegal to grow it at the federal level. And despite some of the changes that were made in 2014, there were continued efforts within the executive branch that continued to stymie efforts to expand hemp production, both within the state level, but also at the federal level. There were, and actually I'm going to talk about some of that later, but a lot of these actions kind of led up to the 2018 Farm Bill, which further expanded upon the pilot program that was established in the 14 Farm Bill, and then where we are today. But it's also worth noting from this timeline that after the 14 Farm Bill, some of the first hemp grown under the 2014 pilot program was in 2016, and we'll see some of those data as we move along here. So it's still important to look at how hemp differs from marijuana under U.S. law. So botanically, both hemp and marijuana are from the same species of plant, Cannabis sativa, but from different varieties and cultivars. There's many differences, including genetic distinctions, distinctions based on their use and chemical makeup. Often their cultivation and production practices are very different. Marijuana, in terms of its intended use, is cultivated mostly for use as a psychotropic drug, whereas hemp is mostly cultivated for a wide range of uses, including food and beverages, personal care products, supplements, fabrics, paper, construction material, and other manufactured goods. And generally, the way that hemp is distinguished from marijuana is based on a general consensus that hemp tends to have low levels of THC, whereas marijuana has higher levels of THC. So the legal definitions are important to keep in mind because they kind of tie to a lot of the discussion of what's going on, especially regarding the definition of hemp, both after the 2014 Farm Bill, but also after the 2018 Farm Bill, and how some of that is all getting wrapped up in the USDA rulemaking process. So marijuana, as I mentioned, is Schedule I controlled substance under the Controlled Substances Act. And you can see where the Farm Bill, 2018 Farm Bill, I won't touch my screen here, but where you can see the marijuana does not include hemp as defined in section in section 1639.0 of Title VII. That's basically what carves out hemp as defined from the marijuana definition, making it no longer subject to DEA regulation and the Controlled Substances Act. So then when you go into Title VII, how hemp was defined in the 2018 Farm Bill, It was also defined in the 2014 Farm Bill, by the way. It had a separate definition that was expanded in the 2018 Farm Bill definition. The other thing that Congress did was to drop the word industrial from the statutory definition, so it's really just hemp. And that has a lot to do with the fact that there are non-industrial applications for hemp. But here is the definition for hemp per the 2018 Farm Bill, and it really derives off of this delta-9 THC, which we'll get into a little bit later, and hopefully the other presenters will expand on it a little bit more than I'm able to. But this definition that you see here is the expanded definition in the 2018 Farm Bill. Again, based off of the delta-9 THC and including any part of the plant, that also becomes an issue as we go through. Actually, I'm going to skip really quickly to this slide first before we look at the market, because kind of looking at the legal the threshold, the THC concentration threshold a little bit more is important to have a little bit of understanding of how that level got set. Many seem to argue that it is generally a arbitrary threshold without a clear scientific basis. That seems to bear out in much of the literature, and it is said to have most likely originated in a 1976 Canadian research paper, which used the threshold mostly for illustrative purposes, kind of comparing different varieties and cultivars. However, the 0.3 THC concentration became established. It became the basis for Canada's hemp law and program in 1998. It's also currently around the level that is observed that's used in the European Union, although previously that level was set at a higher level of 0.5, and apparently there are discussions underway to try to raise that to beyond its current THC threshold. And also when the U.S. Congress first defined industrial hemp in the 2014 Farm Bill, they did adopt the 0.3% THC, which also was in the initially introduced legislation from Representative Ron Paul back in 2005. Then because of different practices in different countries, and the United Nations generally recognizes 0.3 as the upper regulatory limit for hemp, which isn't to say that that everybody agrees on that particular level. And certainly USDA's comments to USDA's rulemaking is bearing that out. There are a number of countries that reportedly have a 1% THC limit, and West Virginia has also set its state law at a 1% THC threshold as part of its state program. Then I'm going to kind of go back to this slide here, just to talk a little bit about hemp in the marketplace. So this slide provides a graphic of current hemp markets. The global market for hemp is said to consist of more than 25,000 products across several submarkets, including agriculture, textiles, recycling, automotive, furniture, food and beverages, paper, construction material, and personal care, reflecting three distinct markets for hemp: fiber, seed grain, and flour. Flour with a W and not a flower with a U. Some have even kind of broken this out into a kind of a fourth submarket of extracts and concentrates, but I've kept it here with the flour. Most extracts and concentrates do derive, at least the higher quality extracts and concentrates derive from flour. However, some extracts and concentrates apparently are being made using other parts of the plant, including trim and total biomass. But here, for simplicity's sake, we're just going to kind of break it into these three markets, and you can see that there are different product uses depending on the three different markets: fiber, mostly textiles, rope, and paper; clothing, seed, food, and beverages, but also personal care products and dietary supplements that should be listed under the seed category. And flowers, the same type of food, beverages, cosmetics, and dietary supplements. USDA does not have a formal analysis of how large the retail market is, but the Hemp Industries Association has been compiling these numbers for a number of years. The most recent one available is for 2017. And as you can see, about 2/3 of U.S. retail sales consist of food, dietary supplements, personal care, and hemp-derived CBD. What's interesting is that one thing that I didn't mention is one thing that the Farm Bill did not do, and the Farm Bill did not change the laws of FDA or the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which regulate CBD, and currently FDA is reviewing all of this now. It's a presentation of all on its own. It's a very large issue. It's not part of the Hemp USDA rulemaking, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, other than to say that hemp-derived CBD, according to FDA, for various reasons, is currently unlawful. But as you can see, about a large share of the annual retail sales currently consist of hemp-derived CBD. So the current retail market, being about $820 million in 2017, is predicted to continue to grow. Some growth estimates predict sharp growth. The American Farm Bureau predicts that by 2022, the hemp market could reach about $2 billion. So as I mentioned, in the 1990s, a lot of states started to allow for hemp production in their orders, but it was still illegal at the federal level. Prior to the 2014 Farm Bill, there were a handful of states that allowed for production, but after the 2014 Farm Bill, all states started to change their laws to allow for hemp production, and as of current day, we have nearly all states that are allowing for hemp production, but it still remains illegal in Idaho, Mississippi, South Dakota, D.C., and the territories. Again, this is production, cultivation of hemp. And hemp production numbers, kind of, you can see how things have grown since the 2014 Farm Bill was enacted. All of this production is happening under the pilot program, because under the current program, the 2020 crop year will include requirements under USDA's current rulemaking. But these are production numbers that under the 2014 pilot program. As you can see, it's growing quite rapidly. However, it's important to keep in mind that this is still a small share of all U.S. harvested cropland. It's really just a small fraction of 1% in 2018. So it's we have a number of states that are leading producing states: Colorado, Montana, Oregon, Kentucky. But a lot of these state-level production data are changing a lot year to year, and each year, as these states adopt changes to their laws, they're coming online with production of their own, and also the requirements and the costs can vary quite widely across different states. Here you can see a little bit more detail on some of the available state-level information. The column for 2019 reflects acres licensed, and there is a big difference between planted acres, harvested acres, and licensed acres. And we don't really know why farmers will obtain licenses and then decide not to plant hemp, but it probably has something to do with some of the requirements in their state and just the cost of entering into this regulatory environment. But there is a lot, only about 30% of planted acres, 30% of licensed acres are actually planted. And then the difference between planted and harvested acres probably gets to some of the issues regarding whether or not the actual hemp that's harvested is compliant. And currently, based on available data, it looks as if about 75 to 90% of planted acres are actually harvested. And USDA themselves have said that they expect that only about 20%, that about 20% of annual hemp grown will exceed the legal THC limit. So as I kind of mentioned, we already talked about this, a lot of the actions post-2014 that led to Congress taking additional action in 2018. But one thing that bears mentioning is, let's see, going to skip over to some of the issues that kind of came up related to the hemp definition in the 2016 Statement of Principles. The 2016 Statement of Principles was an important document because it was a joint statement from DEA, USDA, and FDA about how, to proceed with hemp production, processing, marketing, and transportation. And one of the things that many in the industry and also many in the U.S. Congress took issue with was kind of revolved around this definition of hemp. And hopefully Mike and Sandra might touch on this a little bit more. But in the 2016 joint statement, there were two things that were that are notable. One was the statement that it would be a total THC concentration as opposed to the Delta 9 THC, but also an emphasis on industrial purposes, fiber and seed, which seemed to exclude some of the flowering material. And that the flowering material, again, is a lot of the stuff that's driving the CBD market. And there was a concern that if you added all of these things together, it could bring you, it could increase your chance that you were going to become non-compliant or, exceed the legal definition for hemp, the 0.3%, and kind of move you into the hot hemp, which would move you into the DEA regulations and, risk having you lose your entire crop because it would need to be destroyed under current law. So this was an issue in 2016, and probably, among other things, some of the reasons why Congress decided again to act in the 2018 Farm Bill. And so following the 2018 Farm Bill, USDA developed its regulations, and they were released in October 2019, and industry in Congress is going through those comments now, and there is quite a bit of concern regarding some of the testing and sampling requirements per USDA's regulation. So reactions to some of USDA's testing and sampling requirements, again, kind of hit on this hemp definition issue. But broadly, among some of the key elements of concern are the fact that hemp plants must be tested within 15 days of anticipated harvest. Testing labs must be USDA approved and DEA registered. And the test method must consider the potential conversion of THCA in hemp into Delta 9 THC and must reflect the total available THC derived from the sum of the THC and the THCA content. And that gets again into some of these issues of total THC and whether or not the calculation of all of those things, including THC isomers and non-THC isomers, and how that could get you closer, that could push you over this legal threshold more quickly. So there is still this disagreement about Congress's intentions and how the executive branch is interpreting some of these definitions. There's also concerns about some of the sampling requirements, being the top 1/3 of the plant, focusing on the flower material. What does that mean for hemp producers who are growing exclusively for the fiber or the seed grain market, where they may not necessarily want to have their plant go to flower, or they're using different types of plant genetics. It seemed some have complained that some of these requirements are a bit restrictive. And then there were also concerns about how USDA would view farmers who might exceed, possibly multiple times, the allowable limit, and what might be the ceiling of what limit they would be able to exceed. So in terms of next steps, there are two real options, and one is regulatory and one is legislative. And depending on who you talk to, in terms of regulatory options, the main avenue there would be for USDA to modify its regulatory requirements based on comments received to its interim final rule. A lot of folks have commented that they would like the THC threshold to be raised to 1%, but it's my understanding that would be something that would be exclusively within the domain of the U.S. Congress in terms of changing the law. But there may perhaps be some options depending on how USDA kind of works within the parameters of this total THC. But these things at the regulatory level are within USDA's domain, and it kind of remains to be seen how they will move forward. It also remains to be seen whether or not Congress will further amend federal law and take further legislative action. And will that be a separate standalone bill outside of Farm Bill year, or will it be within the next Farm Bill year, which probably won't be until 2022, 2023, kind of based on their typical 5-year horizon on a Farm Bill. These are things that remain to be seen, and I am not sure how they will move forward, but it will be interesting to see what happens as the hemp market kind of matures more and becomes a regular part of the U.S. Farm economy. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you so much, Renee. We did have quite a few questions that have come in. So we're just going to go through just two right now, and then we'll save the rest for the roundtable discussion at the end. So the first question we have is from David, and he's asking, when you refer to illegal hemp, do you mean that they don't have a license to possess, grow, or process it, or illegal hemp as in over the 0.3% THC, which then technically takes it out of the hemp realm into the marijuana realm?
So both would be legal under the 2018 Farm Bill. In order to be legal, it would have to grow within the requirements of USDA's hemp production regulation. And so they would have to have a license, either issued by the state or tribe or the USDA general plan for growing hemp. And in terms of hot hemp or anything that exceeds the legal definition, the calculation of the legal definition is site specific. There's a margin of uncertainty kind of associated with the 0.3. So it's not a flat 0.3. That kind of would get into a lot of different discussion. But in both cases, I think in both cases, I would say that they would be legal. It's when Congress legalized hemp, and I don't tend to use the word legalized hemp. They removed hemp from the Controlled Substances Act by specifically carving it out of the marijuana definition. It's still hemp as defined in law and subject to USDA regulation.
All right. Last question we have for now is from Joshua Yohanan. He's asking, when discussing the legality of hemp, what definition is used after harvest? Isn't it possible to have legal hemp at the time of testing prior to harvesting and then illegal hemp once encountered on the street?
I think I would have to defer to my other presenters on that issue, because really under USDA's rule, it really deals with cultivation only. So we're not dealing with any THC levels that are in any processed products, any extracts or derivatives. It really is the USDA's rule only affects growers. Some of the states have processor licenses, and there is some discussion about, how far does how far does the 2018 Farm Bill go, and how far does USDA's rulemaking go in terms of reaching into different products. But really, the testing and the sampling per USDA's rule is in field, and some of the roadside tests that law enforcement is looking for in order to make those types of post-production, post-harvest, once it's gone through the USDA process, those are kind of separate from what I know in terms of what I cover on the hemp production side of things per USDA's program and the Farm Bill. It kind of gets into also some of the FDA requirements, which really are outside the Farm Bill. Again, the Congress specifically did not amend or modify laws or requirements of FDA in the Farm Bill, and so that kind of gets into another different product space too.
All right, thank you so much, Renee. With that, we're going to go ahead and move into our next presenter of the day. I'm going to go ahead and take back over the screen just for now, just so we can introduce our second presenter. So our second presenter of the day is Mr. Mike Goodrich. He is the owner and president of Cornerstone Analytical Laboratories and director of analytical operations for Harvest Analytical Laboratories. He has worked as an analytical chemist for over 30 years, supporting many different regulatory environments, with the most experience with EPA and FDA. Over the years, he has worked with USP, AOAC, and NIOSH to develop and validate new methods for emerging industries. He is the director of analytical operations at Harvest Analytical Laboratories and has been responsible for generating, operating, and quality procedures. Harvest Analytical was open in support of the industrial hemp industries to provide accurate results to ensure the product safety and compliance. As an independent contract testing facility, he is tasked with providing farmers, processors, manufacturers, and the public information on the hemp products they are producing or consuming. And without any further ado, I would like to hand things over to Mike Goodrich. Mike? Just 1 second. It looks like Mike might have lost his sound. Mike, do we have you now?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Josh, shoot me a message here. I've lost your sound. Okay, well, I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started. I kind of lost all the central connection here, but let's see what goes on here. All right. First off, I'm going to start with a little video that kind of helps explain the situation labs are in, but enjoy. All right. So again, this is a good lead in for what we're doing. And we did get their permission to use this since they are a group of lawyers. Understanding the analytical challenges of THC analysis. Again, we are a testing facility and we have a lab that's dedicated to the testing of just hemp products alone, and that's Harvest Analytical. And then Cornerstone is a custom method development lab. And so I was brought into the hemp space about 2 years ago. I had a lot of people asking me because the farmers, they want to produce good product. They want to be in compliance. They're terrified of having their investment lost due to a bad test from a state lab coming out and then losing their entire facility. So they do a lot of testing on the front side. So as far as my experience goes, I've worked with the AOAC on method developments in several different products. I've worked in EPA and FDA certified labs. And so I've got a lot of history of the regulatory side. And so that's why a lot of people were coming to me to help set this up. And now with the new USDA guidelines requiring that labs be ISO certified and the work that goes with that. And we're looking at the future when the FDA gets a hold of this and requiring labs to be GMP certified as well. And so that's the experience that we bring to the hemp industry. And so with that being said, let's get into it. Why is testing important from the farmer side and such? It's basically broken down into two categories, whether it be marijuana or industrial hemp. You're into two different categories. The first one being, what's my product contain? The potency, how strong is the THC for legal reasons in the hemp industry, and then for use in the marijuana industry. And then the profile, the other cannabinoids that are present. There's a whole series of cannabinoids. I believe there's been over 160 of them that are identified and looked at for different medical pathways. And again, this is a looking down the road in this world, but identifying medical pathways for the desired use of the products. And then the terpene or the flavor that's there. So that's on the what does my product contain? And then is my product safe? All cannabis plants are scavengers in nature. They'll suck up minerals, any kind of organic chemicals that are in the ground. And so there's a large emphasis put on safety, especially the people in the medical realm are already compromised. Their immune systems are already compromised. And so sensitivity to pesticides, heavy metals from the ground, mycotoxins left by microbes, any kind of solvent that is left over from processing of these are all things that are tested for before products go out to the consumer. And so again, right now, the groups that are making these are trying to do a self-regulation to help ease the burden when full regulation comes in. Here's a look at one of our certificate of analysis. And so in the hemp world, most of these will come in with a certificate of analysis. It'll show what tests they ran on it. Typically, you want to see what kind of limit of quantitation did they set the bar to. And then, we present the data a few different ways for the profile. So the first side here we're looking at is the profile. And so we see, basically in percentages. And so in Tennessee, this is a concentrate sample. And so, and actually it's a really high concentration of CBD. So most of the material has been converted to the CBD product. It's 80.49%. And of course, when you concentrate the cannabinoids, the THC is concentrated as well. So you see that at 2.58 in a concentrate, in a distillate. But at this point, that product can't be sold as a final product because, of course, it's over the limit. But they'll dose this out and spread it out within their products to remain under the legal limits. If you look at the other side, we're looking at the terpene profile. And so this is where the flavor comes from, all the different aromatics that are there. And so you can get an idea of what's in the product. Two of the things we really focus on is making sure that certificate of analysis does have a photo of what's sampled, and then it's signed by a laboratory, and that person is amongst the lab. And we'll talk a couple of the reasons about that later. But basically, it's just to ensure that when you're looking at a product and you have a certificate of analysis, that's what was tested. And so, again, here we're looking at two different strains of cannabis. One is legal, one is not. Looking at the two of them, they look a little bit different, but genetically, there's a lot of different strains on both sides that are hemp and strains that are marijuana. And so it's really hard. You can't do it by looking at it. In this case, the industrial hemp, it's below 0.3. Marijuana strains, the 5 to 25 range for THC and marijuana is really getting pushed higher and higher because as more people are working with genetics, they're trying to get that higher THC, thus further separating the industrial hemp strains from the marijuana strains. And so again, you see it in products. You get two products that look identical. The testing of it is critical to find out what's present. And so with this group, I'm usually on the other side. I'm on the product manufacturer side of, hey, they're trying to test their label claims. But again, from a legal standpoint, the tests are very similar. So here we have cold pond cream and then salve that's a CBD infused salve. So it's really hard to tell just by looking. And so you have to get into the analytical side of it. Plant material testing. When you look at this plant, you see, it's got leaves, it's got stalks, it's got little, the material is not homogeneous. So you got the hairs on there, you've got trichomes, and how you sample and how you look at the material is definitely critical in the process. And so again, from coming from your point of view on the forensic side, testing it, making sure you get a good representative sample and understanding how, that sampling can really affect the result is critical on the that side of it. So again, it's looking at the material and how do you come up with an analytical technique that fits in sometimes a case where there's not a lot of sample available. Here you can see the magnified view of the hairs on there. All of this material, the sugar leaves, as it matures, sometimes fall away, and so you'll lose some of that product. But then that product is dried, and then that product is extracted to get the cannabinoids out. And so, again, when you extract all those components, you're concentrating them down to a stronger form. And so it's not just the plant material we're seeing anymore. Why is this increasing? When you go to Google, you do uses for THC, you get only 29 million. It's a nice number, but when you start looking at the CBD and CBD products, you're getting 200 million different pages popping up. And so some of these products are overlapping, but the number of products that have been introduced in the last calendar year is pushing that number up extremely quickly. The cannabinoids, you'll see all kinds of educational material. THC eases pain, it eases nausea, slows inflammation. CBD controls certain cancers, stimulates bone growth, stops growth of bacteria. Again, all of these things are right now unfounded medical claims. And so they're looking at trying to get some of those identified. And so, but that's why this is becoming more and more complex as people are trying to understand the individual cannabinoid, whether it be THC or CBD or CBC, and then looking at things like the entourage effect when they're trying to mix like CBG with CBD in a certain ratio to get a desired medical effect. And then all the testing that goes on with that side of it. But from a forensic side, it's why are these products showing up with THC and what's it limited to. It's not, the weed of yesterday in a Ziploc baggie. There's they've got great labeling, they've got great packaging, and is what they have in there really what the labels are claiming? And again, these are all parts of the industry that are not directed by the USDA yet, as far as they're trying to clamp down on that. The medical claims, the FDA is issued several letters to people making medical claims on labels, and again, it's just not there yet. But from a criminal investigation side, what are they doing for the THC present? Okay, so now we'll go through some of these definitions. You see all kinds of labels on these products: full spectrum, broad spectrum, Delta 9 THC free or zero THC. What does THCA mean? And so we'll go through these real quick. Full spectrum is the crude extract of a cannabis plant, whether it be marijuana or hemp. And so you're looking at the cannabinoids, how much Delta 9 is there. All the cannabinoids are present, and most strains are CBD dominant, but now a big mark is being put on CBG as some more genetics are being created to optimize the CBG in the plant. And so again, when you look at the genetics and the work going on, all these plant materials, you can look at something that looks like a marijuana and it's been genetically altered to be a hemp plant. And so they're trying to fine tune those strains to what grows well in Tennessee may not be the one to grow great out in Colorado. And the genetics that grow great in Colorado and are well below legal limits get in Tennessee's soil, and suddenly they're growing and going hot. And so, again, these are all parts of that aspect. Here you can see a crude oil. It's been decarb, but basically that means they've converted it all. You've got just over 3.06% THC with a 61% total CBD. So again, these products will be refined, and then whether they're creating a CBD isolate or a distillate, again, that's all part of their process here. Broad spectrum, basically they start distilling the product and doing the first pass of a distillation. They'll get rid of the terpenes that are present and just focus on the cannabinoids. They may do some chemical cleanup of the THC to get rid of THC, and so they consider that a broad spectrum. Here's a HPLC chromatogram showing, the resolution of HPLC allows us to see the acid form as well as the decarboxylated form. And so it gives you a better idea of what the profile looks like. Where we're focused is on the Delta 9 THC and the THCA, and we'll go through how those calculations are made in just a minute. But again, this is a full representation of the profile present. The cannabinoids that are standard tested for, as you see, there's Delta 9 is in the green. It's got a unique CAS number of 1972-08-3. THCA is a different compound. And, again, this is where some of the people on the farm side are really trying to take back and say, hey, look, this is what our product is. And they're trying to say the Delta 9, well, the total potential, and we'll go into that in a little bit later as well, again, is creating some chemical changes to get everything in the form of Delta 9. And so you see all the cannabinoids are very similar. They're very similar in formula weights. And you can see here the decarboxylated values, the Delta 9, the CBG, the CBD, CBN, they can all be analyzed by FID as well as HPLC. And again, it's just what you have available. But again, the overall profile is more descriptive on the HPLC. And so, but what it does is it gives you the total values if you use GC. Let's look at the cannabinoids here. We've got THCA and CBDA, and then THC and CBD. The only things that are different are, the THC has the cyclic ring here, whereas the CBD or the has the hydroxyl group. And so you see that in both the acid form, where you have the carboxylic acid, or the decarboxylated form. The THC, the delta 9 THC here, is the psychoactive form, whereas the THCA is not. So again, they all have unique, as they are in the plant, the dominant strains in the plant are the acid forms. And so you have to convert the acid form in that, whether it be in the plant material or the extract, to the decarboxylated form. No delta 9. You see a lot of products that'll show 0 delta 9, but again, it's all in how they set up the testing for that and what their LOQ is at that point. And so again, that's a big issue for labeling. And then a lot of people that are taking CBD products that they believe are made out of hemp and have the low THC are suddenly failing drug tests for THC. And again, that'll be another discussion for another day. But the definition of no THC is definitely something that's got to be addressed within the industry. But again, for an investigation unit, the 0.3 is where you're set up to look for. And so again, you're looking at 0.3 delta 9 or total THC. And so the delta THCA, again, you can see it's got the carboxylic acid here, and that differentiates it from the delta 9. So how do you get to the decarboxylated form? These materials are not stable. The carboxylic acid there, they show here in this formula, if you want to drive it immediately, any kind of heat above 105 degrees will drive off the CO2. And, but the plant also has a natural ability as time goes on to lose that. And so you have some natural decarboxylation as well as a forced or chemically derived decarboxylation. So again, you're losing 44 Daltons, and I'll show you why that becomes important in the calculation for total THC. So on total THC, you're looking at delta 9 plus the THCA that can be decarboxylated into delta 9. And so again, it's just the total of THCA, the total of the delta 9 THC. And then you can do it if you're doing the analysis by HPLC to get the full profile. You can see that the THCA and the formula weight difference is 44. And so that's 0.877 times your THC concentration plus the delta 9. And that formula works the same for the CBD. And so because there's only that one bond difference, it's the same formula for both of them. Isolates. Now, isolates are, again, further refined. And so people right now in the industry are doing a lot of CBD isolates. You'll see a lot of CBG coming up because there's been some people that believe there's some medical pathways on that are definitely interesting. But again, isolates, the process requires more refining. They most times require recrystallization in either pentane or some other nonpolar solvent. And so there's residual solvent concerns. There are people that are doing cleanup steps in hemp products where they're removing THC. Well, there's also people that are removing THC from the hemp products and storing the THC. So again, that's a THC isolate will have a much larger effect. And then there's some new CBDP and THCP were just published, I want to say on the 30th of December this past year. And those are two newly discovered cannabinoids that apparently have about a 30 times more psychoactive and more biologically available receptors. And so those are all things that again, this industry is changing a lot. It's changed a lot in the last 4 years, and I expect a whole lot more changes in the next 2 to 3 years. The other thing that the definition takes into account is moisture content. And so hemp plants in the field may have a 60 to 70% water mass on that. And so you have to either do a long-term dry, or you can in dry material, or you do a moisture correction. But all of that has to be calculated when you take samples from the field. It's based on the dried weight basis. And so again, doing that calculation, you've got a 100% minus the percent moisture, so you get your moisture factor, and then it's just a simple correction for the to correct for dry weight result, which will always push your result higher than what you see on the instrument. As far as sample types go, we're looking at a whole lot of different sample types. There's everything from flour, smokable, chewable, to oils, salves, concentrates. You've got gummy infused, coffee infused. We've seen coffee stir sticks. We've seen horse treats. We've seen animal treats. And so there's a wide variety that these extracts can be put in. And again, that's each one of these sample types creates a new headache for testing purposes on the THC, because you have to worry about what other things are in the sample matrix to get a good analytical number. Plant materials, like I said, again, you've got plant materials, you've got products, concentrates. Each one of them create their own plant material, have more water to worry about, but generally will be your easier tests. The concentrates, again, will be an easier test because it's just the cannabinoids that have been extracted. The products, because there's such a wide array of products, each product has a different base. You have to worry about what that base is, how homogeneous is the material. Getting things homogeneous, getting a good sample size. So if I'm sampling a flower, I don't grab one that's the highest concentration, but taking a representative sample. Solubility becomes a factor in a lot of products. Can I do a methanol extraction, or do I need to look at acetonitrile or maybe a hexane extraction? What are the effects on the solubility with each of those? Sample storage. You've got plant material that's photosensitive and heat sensitive, and so it degrades over time, and you can change it with you drive more moisture off of it. You can do the same with products. The products, a lot of them have homogeneity issues in the manufacturing of the products. And so all of these things have to be, when you're preparing samples, have to be taken into account. Problems with test results, as far as test reports that are accompany flowers, a lot of times there's a lot of bootleg test reports out there. So, people are just copying an old report, putting it with a new lot. They're not testing lots. They tested it when they did it the first time 2 years ago, and then they come in and address it later on. Sample stability. Again, these degrade over time. A lot of people haven't done the shelf life studies that normal products have already had. The origin of the material becomes an issue because of, was it hemp created in Tennessee that has a Delta 9 state, or is it in Kentucky where the limit is 0.3 for a total THC? And, with the rules of the Farm Bill saying once it's declared and it's made from a certified hemp program, it's always a hemp product. Well, now you can have things going interstate travel that suddenly don't follow those rules. Again, sample storage, heat sensitivity, photosensitivity, just natural degradation. And so questions, there's a million questions I have as far as rounding, significant figures, once hemp, always hemp, looking at the CBD ratio to THC, because again, in a hemp plant, you're going to see that number much higher than a marijuana plant. You're going to have a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC or even lower. Whereas, ideally in a hemp plant, you want to see about a 40-to-1 CBD to THC. State regulations over federal regulations versus military regulations. So again, designing your experiments to handle all those things are important. The inclusion of method uncertainty, when you have limited sample, determining your method uncertainty on a material that you haven't extracted before, again, is something that will become a challenge at some point. And then what are the plants being, the plants of the products, the concentrates, what are they being used for, building materials, all the waste products and things that, hey, I'm making a CBD product, but now I've got this waste THC that all of a sudden becomes an issue. So I've got a million questions. I'm sure you guys have them as well. So now I guess I can open it up to questions, or I can pass the baton on to the next speaker.
Mike, are you able to hear me currently? Okay, so it looks like Mike is not currently able to hear us. So what we're going to do is we're just going to move into our next presenter, and then we'll see if we can get Mike back up.
And I'm not hearing anything. There we go.
What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presenter, and then we'll get Mike back with some questions during the roundtable discussion. All right, so our next and last presenter of the day is Dr. Sandra Rodriguez Cruz. She is a senior research chemist at the DEA Special Testing and Research Laboratory. She started her career with the DEA in 2002 and has analyzed thousands of cases and provided court testimony in state and federal jurisdictions. She serves as a subject matter expert at the DEA Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and has participated in the development of DEA laboratory policies such as measurement uncertainty, method validation, and sampling. She's also a subject matter expert on the use of LC-MS, DESI-MS, and DART-MS. Dr. Rodriguez Cruz has published numerous manuscripts in peer-reviewed journals and internal DEA publications. She is certified ABC Drug Analyst Fellow, a fellow member of the AAFS, and a member of the CLIC and ASTM International. She serves as the Secretariat of SWIG Drug and is the past chair of the Seized Drugs Subcommittee within OSAC. Dr. Rodriguez Cruz has a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from the University of Puerto Rico, a PhD in Chemistry from the University of California at Berkeley, and a postdoctoral fellowship at the Rowland Institute for Science, Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to hand things over to our last presenter, Dr. Sandra Rodriguez Cruz.
Hello? Can you hear me?
All right, Sandra. Yes, ma'am. We can see your screen if you just want to bring up your PowerPoint.
Yes. All right. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am. Perfect. You're good to go.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you also to Renee and Mike for those introductions, and provide the audience with a lot of the background that, in fact, those of us that are working in the forensic chemistry and drug analysis field not get to hear often about. And I'm not going to repeat a lot of the information that has already been provided, but obviously these changes as a result of the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, also known as the Farm Bill 2018, had an immediate effect on drug analysis laboratories. And specifically because now the identification of marijuana requires an assessment of the THC level in the material that has been submitted to the laboratory. Now, this is a very, very unique scenario from the point of view of controlled substance analysis, because for the first time, we actually are in the position where in order to make a qualitative identification of a particular controlled substance, we actually need to look or roughly assess or finally quantitate the level of a particular compound. For us and the Drug Enforcement Laboratory, this created, in fact, resulted in the suspension, temporary suspension of suspected marijuana submissions to all of our regional laboratories, because the analytical scheme we had been using for decades to analyze cannabis materials was insufficient, because it did not address assessing that THC level. What I'm going to be presenting today and summarizing is our initial scope of a new analytical scheme, and it was specified for the assessment of plant materials, since they are the majority of substances that are submitted to our laboratories. And just as a reminder that even though I may be presenting methods of analysis in the combination of analytical scheme that other laboratories may in fact implement, just a reminder that I am going to be looking at this from the federal jurisdiction point of view, and especially when we get to the reporting session, just so everybody is aware. So we'll move on, and this is what our old analytical scheme used to look like. We perform an examination of the plant material, similar to the vast majority of laboratories out there, macroscopic and microscopic analysis of the plant material, just to identify those morphological characteristics of the cannabis plant. The Duquesnoy-Levine color test, also known as the modified Duquesnoy test, that is selective for cannabinoids in general. So it did not, was not selective enough for one or two specific cannabinoids. And then the analyst had the option of performing a chromatographic analysis, either in the form of TLC or GCFID and GCMS. During the last decade, most of our analysts had, in fact, moved into performing GCFID or GCMS. Our new analytical scheme, which went into effect, implemented back in June of 2019, still includes examination of the plant material via microscopic examination. And now we are utilizing a new color test, a typification color test that I'll discuss in a little bit. And we conclude the testing by performing a GCMS analysis that provides us with the separation of cannabinoids, as well as the identification of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol and any other cannabinoids that may be present. But it also, because of the sample preparation steps that we have standardized and validated, it allows us to assess very quickly what the THC level in the sample may be. So let's start with the color test. And a lot of you, I know in the audience, have in fact heard me provide this information before. But for the benefit that everybody that's listening, this particular color test, also known as the typification color test, it was developed in Switzerland by the Forensic Institute of Zurich. It was a request by the Zurich police. And the need for the color test came about because back in 2016, the Swiss Ministry of Health approved the first tobacco substitute in Switzerland to be legally used. And this was in fact a CBD-rich hemp product. So of course, now law enforcement were faced with a situation in which out on the street, they needed to be able to distinguish who was in fact smoking the CBD-rich product that was legal versus illegal material with high THC content. The test was developed and it produces a change in color based on the ratio of THC to CBD. It is not a 1% purity test. We are all aware that there have been some information distributed through discussions circles and webpage about this test, in fact, being a 1% test, and that is not the case. And I will show you the test and validation test that we did that in fact told us and confirmed what the test is actually, how is it producing the colors. We don't know what the origin of that confusion might have been, but what the test does do is to let us know if the THC to CBD ratio is above 1, not 1%, or if the THC to CBD ratio is below 1. And it does that in a pretty nice way. And during our validation, not only we were able to confirm that, but also confirm where is it that the test may not produce consistent results. It might have also led to produce the confusion, the fact that the Swiss legal threshold, the legal threshold THC in Switzerland is in fact 1%, as Renee mentioned during the first presentation. So we have been able to in fact clarify how the test works. Why is it that it's called a typification test? Well, it's in general because it distinguishes between the two main phenotypes of cannabis. And this classification of cannabis as phenotypes or in different types of plants goes back to the 1970s, where the first drug type, chemotype number 1, and chemotype number 3, the fiber type, were in fact identified. Later on, a third category was proposed, chemotype number 2. This is a chemotype where the THC and CBD levels are about the same. And later in late 1980s, there have been other chemotypes. For example, one where the CBG is the predominant cannabinol with very low levels of THC and CBD. So the classifications and the distinction of these species based on the THC to CBD ratios goes back quite a few decades. This color test, which is called the 4-aminophenol color test, we abbreviated as the 4AP color test. It consists on two very simple reagents. The first reagent contains the 4-aminophenol compound in an acidic solution of ethanol. And the second reagent is sodium hydroxide, a very basic solution in 3070 water ethanol. And these, the ingredients of this solution had been previously published by Swiss Hadener et al. This is the Swiss group that performed the original test, that designed the original test. It is recommended that both solutions be kept in the refrigerator as well as in amber glass containers. Reagent number 1 tends to turn yellow after a few weeks, after a few days if left outside. In terms of preparation, how do we go about performing the testing? We use about 5 milligrams, sometimes even less sample is needed, and it all depends on the cannabinoid content of the material that you are testing. We use the sample as received, no drying procedures, as the samples that we do receive in drug enforcement laboratories are, for the most part, do not contain the moisture that a hemp laboratory would be facing. We sample the buds and the leaves, break up in pieces before performing the test, and we avoid those parts of the plants that are known to have low cannabinoid content, such as the seeds, stalks, and stems, and the roots. Now, we're not avoiding just the low THC content, we're avoiding those parts that, in fact, the total cannabinoid is known to be low. Sections of the plants like the stem and the roots, as well as the seeds that are known to have almost no content on cannabinoids. The test is particularly easy to perform. All you need to do is either use a test tube or a spot plate, and use a small amount of material, as I mentioned, and use reagent number 1 to cover, just enough to cover the material. And of course, that will depend on the container that you're using. And after the addition of 2 to 4 drops of reagent number 2 and a waiting time of about 1 to 2 minutes, it will let you know if you have an excess of THC, if your sample is THC rich or CBD rich, and depending on the color that is produced. We were able to investigate and assess how we see that the test was performing, what was it that these colors were being produced. And we were able to do that via collaboration with the Virginia Department of General Services, and the Division of Consolidated Laboratory Services provided us with 36 samples that they had been received from the 2018 harvest in Virginia. And these particular 36 samples that were received had been previously quantified using their GCFID methodology. And these were the concentrations that for the THC, CBD, and CBN that were calculated. And we took those 36 samples, and for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to separate it into 3 sets of 12. This is the first set of 12 samples, and I have organized them here in increasing THC concentration. The CBD concentration slightly increases, but is not exactly in the order as the THC. And as you can see, for all these samples, a pink result was obtained when the test was performed, confirming that in fact it is looking at the ratio of the THC to CBD. And because for all these samples, the CBD was found in excess, and that's when the test produces the pink result. This is what those samples look like on a spot plate. You see different shades of the pink color. They all depend, of course, on that concentration of cannabidiol that we saw slightly increasing in the samples. The second set of 12 samples also produced the expected pink results when the level of CBD was in excess and higher than the level of THC. But we also saw 4 instances where instead of the pink, we started seeing the blue color. And when you look at the THC to CBD values previously obtained by the Hemp laboratory, the blue color is in fact consistent with the higher content of THC when compared to the CBD level in these particular samples. My apologies, is the colors in this slide cannot be seen very well, but these are those 12 samples done in test tubes. The colors are slightly different, harder to see if you're using test tubes. I prefer to use the white spot plates. You don't need as much sample and you get more clear display of the colors. But here you can distinguish the dark pink colors versus the blue that were obtained for those samples that I pointed out. This is the third set of 12 samples. Again, an increasing THC level, and in fact, it's increasing going by the 1% level and above. And in this case, again, we saw example 4 samples turning pink, consistent with the concentration of CBD being in excess of the concentration of THC, as well as very low-level samples, but that still have an excess of the CBD component. Now, we also saw 4 particular samples that produced results that were somewhat inconclusive. In fact, they went from a deep pink or purple to more of a navy blue color. And as we noticed, for these particular 4 samples, the level of THC and CBD were not as differentiated as they were found in the other samples. And this is what those samples look like. And this sample 73 label here is a very good example of that, as well as 70 and 77, where we see the deep purple color together with the generation of a much darker blue than the one that's in fact generated when we have a clear excess of THC. Now, this inconclusive result is mainly the combination of this pink complex that is formed when we have a CBD-like compound mixed with the blue color that's formed when we have a THC-based compound. So it leads to not a clear conclusion regarding which one of these 2 cannabinoids is in fact in excess. The selectivity studies that we have done, and we have done a lot of these studies in collaboration with the Virginia Department of Forensic Sciences. We had a look at many of the cannabinoids that are commercially available. And what we learned from this is that all those cannabinoids that share a similar structure with THC, so that cannabis cyclor, cannabinol, as well as the tetrahydrocannabinol, a series of compounds where a 3-ring complex can be formed, a conjugated system different than the one that can be formed with CBD. Those will be the ones where we see the blue color. CBD, CBDA, as well as the CBG types of compounds, they do not have a 2-ring or a 3-ring conjugated system, and therefore they're producing a different color. There has been also a lot of testing on different spices, and we should point out that both oregano and sage do produce results that in the blue spectrum similar to the one that is produced as seen with a THC-rich sample. In addition to the individual selectivity studies that we did for the species, as well as the different reference materials, we also performed a series of repeatability and reproducibility studies so that we could look at the reliability of these tests over an extended period of time. And we did that by using those samples, 36 samples that we obtained from the Division of Consolidated Laboratory Services, as well as with reference materials. And the graph that you're seeing, I'm going to walk you through it. The graph that you're seeing is a graph of positive proportion as a function of THC to CBD ratio, where the ratios are expressed in a log scale. And by positive proportion, this number is calculated based on 10 independent measurements of each one of these samples. So every time you see a symbol here, a diamond, black diamond along this line, that means that that particular sample was tested 10 different times under different conditions, sometimes by adding the reagents in different order, also other times by doing the sample in test tubes, other times by doing the sample in spot plates. And all those 10 times, the sample resulted in a pink color. Therefore, we're calling that a negative result. So the positive proportion for this particular set of samples was 0, because 0 out of 10 times a blue color was produced. 10 times out of 10, a pink color was produced. The same applies for these samples right here along the positive proportion value of 1. What it means is that when each one of these samples was tested, all 10 samples, they produce a blue result. And these samples that are found in this intermediate region where in fact, where the results vary. Sometimes they produce a pink result, sometimes they produce a blue result, and oftentimes they produce that mixed color. And that inconclusive result. And that allowed us to, in fact, identify what we may call the inconclusive region of these tests. And as you can see from the graph, what it turns out is that between 0.3 and 3 on that value of the THC to the CBD ratio, it is expected that inconclusive results may be obtained. Maybe 3 analysts may do the testing and obtain a blue result or a purple result, another analyst may obtain a different result. And in fact, these findings confirm what Hadener and co-workers had published back in 2018 online, and the official publication came in about a year ago in January 2019. They also found that when the concentration of THC and CBD were similar, inconclusive results were obtained. Also a very slow reaction when these two cannabinoids were contained at very low level as expected. And they also identify this uncertainty or inconclusive region between THC to CBD ratios of 0.3 and 3.0. I'll move on to our GCMS analysis test. And just to give you a little bit of background, you may wonder why GCMS? Why are we utilizing a technique such as LC for quantitation or GC-FID for quantitation? And it was because we wanted, from the scope of this particular analytical scheme, we wanted a quick analysis, short analysis time, be able to provide a visual assessment of the THC level. GCMS is a very robust technique that is in all of our laboratories. We also wanted to fulfill our analysis requirements where we could identify the cannabinoids by separation as well as obtain the confirmation of that delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol and any other cannabinoids. It is a limited purpose method. Again, we were going with the goal of having short analysis times, preferably using existing instrumentation that was already found in the laboratories. And we were going with the idea of providing a visual assessment of that THC level when analysts compared to a marker that was going to be used in the samples. And these are the general parameters and figures of our method. We had particular figures of merit that we wanted to achieve based on our policy, but it's a very common dB5 50 meter 0.25 column. We keep the injector at a low temperature to avoid decomposition. The method is a 5.3 minute method that has a wide isothermal window lasting 3 minutes, which is where most of the cannabinoids come out. And even though we were not able to achieve baseline resolution for some of the cannabinoid pairs, that resolution was in fact calculated at about 1. We did want to go with a figure of merit of at least half retention times between delta-9 THC and delta-8 THC separated by more than a tenth of a minute. And this is what a typical chromatogram looks like for this particular set of cannabinoids. This is the internal standard that is in the sample that will in fact become our marker for the 1% level assessment, which is what we're trying to go for. We also tested and see where phencyclidine may come out, just in case any samples get submitted to the laboratory laced in phencyclidine. And just for your information, since it's not shown in this chromatogram, we also tested fentanyl, for example, hydrochloride for this particular method, and it elutes at about 5 minutes. We had some efficiency goals when we were assessing how this sample was going to be prepared. We wanted to use the materials as received. We wanted to have enough material to produce good quality mass spectra. However, we didn't need too much to avoid long weighing times. Based on our sampling and our analysis processes, we need to do this type of testing, this entire analytical scheme, and all this every one of the samples that we select for testing. So this could become quite the task on analyzing one single submission of suspected marijuana. No drying was going to be involved, as well as no grinding or homogenization procedures. We wanted a reasonable extraction time, no decarboxylation prior to analysis, and no derivatization steps involved. And I'm going to take you slowly through this slide because this may explain to you why we ended up with the sample prep the way we ended up. And what we're shooting here is for a marker that would tell us if this particular submission comes with a total THC content of 1%, weight by weight. And so we were shooting on to introducing that marker that would be a marker independent, that wouldn't be a cannabinoid, that could provide the visual assessment to the analyst. And because we are trying to go for the decision limit of 1% weight by weight, if we were to consider a 1% weight by weight sample, and we start with, for example, 25 milligrams of material, Well, we know that the concentration of THC, total THC on that material under ideal conditions would be, under ideal conditions would be 0.25 milligrams of THC in that particular sample of 25 milligrams. And this is assuming that we can in fact obtain and extract all that THC material from the plant, that every single molecule of THCA gets converted into THC, and that every single molecule of THC in fact gets extracted. So if we had that sample of 1% THC, now 0.25 milligrams of material, and we dissolved it in 5 milliliters of extraction solvent, we would end up with a concentration of THC at 0.05 mg per mil. So that provides us with the information of where is it that we needed our marker to be. So the solutions are going to be preparing in a solvent that contains an internal standard at that particular solution. And ideally, this internal standard would be something that behaves like THC under the GCMS analysis conditions. Now, if we are working on the ideal scenario and we can get all these THC molecules and THC already converted molecules into the system, this is what we should be seeing. So under the ideal conditions, this would be the signature that the analyst would be looking at. However, when we in fact took a sample of 1% total THC previously analyzed by the Hemp laboratory, what we observed was this particular ratio, where not all the THC was in fact coming into solution, which in fact can be explained because we are not working in an ideal scenario. We are not processing the sample prior to analysis. We are not drying. We are not grinding. We are only providing it with 10 minutes of extraction time. So it's not surprising that the peak for the THC that we observe under those conditions was in fact lower than our internal standard marker. And most importantly, there is the effect of incomplete decarboxylation. And through our validation studies, we also know and are aware that THC has a lower ionization energy than the internal standard. So there were already differences that we were expecting based on that. And what we did in order, again, to provide that visual marker was to increase our sample size and go from 25 milligrams to about 40 to 50. So again, it would most closely reflect what the actual total concentration of THC in that plant material is, and again, provide the analyst with the visual marker that we were going for. And to that, similar to the variability that we see when we tested the initial sample preparation, we would also see variability as expected from instrument to instrument. So I want to talk a little bit about the decarboxylation issue, and I know Mike alluded to it a little bit, and there's two ways of doing this decarboxylation, and there's a lot of publications out there on the subject. Some of them are in fact misleading. There are two ways that decarboxylation can be accomplished. Either you do it prior to analysis or you do it during analysis. The decarboxylation prior to analysis was a very, very common procedure when THCA was not available as a reference material. So even though analysts in laboratories had liquid chromatography available to them, they decarboxylated the THCA prior to analysis because the calibration curve in the instrument had been prepared using THCA because that was the only reference material available. Now, times has changed, and now we have THCA reference material available, and liquid chromatography provides the direct analysis of both of these species from the point of view of decarboxylation or quantitation of those species. Now, this decarboxylation can also happen during analysis, and it can obviously happen in the GC injector of the system, of the GCMS system that we are using. However, this decarboxylation process is not 100% efficient. And there are publications and studies that go back to 2005 that in fact report this decarboxylation efficiency at only going probably between 60 and 80%. So we know that even when we attempt and we use a high temperature in the injector, not everything is getting converted. Not every single molecule of THCA is in fact being converted to THC. Again, resulting in us just seeing this lower bound of THC. So the final sample preparation ends up, we standardize it at between 40 and 50 milligrams of sample that should be used as received. No drying. Again, we sample the buds and the leaves and avoid those samples that have a very low cannabinoid context. We extract that sample in 5 milliliters of an internal a solvent that is composed of 9-to-1 methanol chloroform. And the 1% marker becomes now the 0.05 androstenedione because this compound has been demonstrated that responds like cannabinoids under similar conditions. And this 9-to-1 methanol chloroform and the androstenedione have been used for many years in the cannabinoid quantitation industry. There are other solvents that can as well be used, especially solvents for that would be more efficient if you were to perform a more extensive extraction on even the low level cannabinoids. And the analysts are to extract this sample for 10 minutes. The initial validation was done by assessing a 9-compound mix, which is the one that I show you the chromatogram of. We investigated the short-term precision as well as the long-term precision, where we monitor both the absolute and relative retention time as well as the THC to internal standard peak ratios. We also did carryovers assessment as well as reference material and plant extraction solutions. We assess the linearity of the method, and we also check the accuracy, assess the accuracy using, again, those hemp samples. This is the linearity data that we obtained for THC as well as CBD and cannabinol. These are all solutions that are prepared in the internal standard solvent. And because that internal standard solvent is at 0.05 mg per mil, when we are at a concentration of 0.2 THC, we would expect a THC to internal standard ratio at about 4. That's not what we see. It is slightly lower. It's a similar behavior observed for cannabinol. For cannabidiol, is the opposite. Instead of a ratio of 4, we see a slightly higher ratio. So this gave us information about the different ionization efficiencies. And from this, we know that part of that decrease and reduced response that we saw for that THC was not only due to the fact that we are not quantitatively extracting and quantitatively decarboxylating. THC also has a lower ionization efficiency when compared to the internal standard. We assessed also 14 of the hemp samples that the Virginia laboratory had already quantified, and we're plotting those values here on the x-axis while we monitor the THC to internal standard ratio produced with this particular GCMS method. And these are single sample injections because that's what the analysts are going to do in the field laboratories. And as you can see, for all those samples that Virginia had in fact determined a percentage below 1%, we do see a ratio below 1. After validation, we transfer the method. We piloted the method at the DEA Dallas regional laboratory. And subsequent to the piloting in Dallas, the method was transferred to the other DEA regional laboratories, and they assessed a 3-compound mix, not the 9-compound. And they were also instructed to perform repeatability experiments when we did 30 consecutive injections. And we also monitor the absolute and relative retention time, as well as the THC to internal standard abundance ratio. And this is all for that 3-compound mix. And in addition to that, we require for them to do an assessment of the accuracy. And for that, we provided them with 3 different samples. One sample containing a THC level where the expected THC to internal standard ratio was going to be below 1, and the other sample where it was going to be above 1, and a sample right in the middle. And this is what those samples look like, with a low THC level, a high THC level compared to the internal standard, as well as the median THC level. And this is the variability and ruggedness that we assess throughout the system, where on 17 instruments throughout the laboratory, all responses, all the instruments for this method validated in all these instruments, all the responses, in fact, provided THC to internal standard ratios that were below 1. For the one that was the high one, all the THC to internal standard ratios were reported above 1, with a variability associated with all the samples. And that sample that was in the middle, that was expected to produce a THC to internal standard ratio of above 1, in fact, centered around that value. And these are the statistics of that particular analysis, that ruggedness assessment that we did on 17 instruments. And these are the average values obtained. These are THC to internal standard ratio values. And this is the standard deviation. Is as expected, the standard deviation increases as the level of THC increases. We also see a similar relative standard deviation as expected throughout the 3 samples, since the standard deviation was observed as increasing. We can take that standard deviation value and convert it to a standard error and get an estimate of, in fact, what the uncertainty associated with those calculated THC ratios would be. However, in real life, our analysts throughout the system are not determining THC to internal standard ratios. They're in fact injecting each one of these samples once and performing individual measurements. So what we really care about is the variability of individual measurements, which is provided by those standard deviation values that we obtain by looking at 17 instruments throughout the system. And the type, we can use this variability to do a risk assessment. And the risk assessment that we want to do is, if a hemp sample is submitted to the laboratory, how likely is it that using this GCMS method, we will see a THC to internal standard ratio above 1. And the best data descriptor that we have, in fact, to represent that variability is that low THC sample that I just showed you in that table. That center at a ratio of about 0.5 with a standard deviation of 0.186. So this provides us with an estimate of the variability of individual results when a low THC sample is encountered in the laboratory, which we may use to estimate the variability of when a hemp sample comes to the laboratory. So we can use this variability and this assessment to, in fact, see the fitness for purpose and assess the fitness for purpose of our decision limit. And let's say this particular sample is a hemp sample with an expected ratio of anywhere from 0.2 to 0.4. If we use that standard deviation that we obtain in a student T value for 99% confident, we ended up we may in fact see ratios up to 0.6 or 0.8. And the good thing is that in fact those ratios will still be below their administrative decision limit for a ratio of 1. So we were able to use this ruggedness assessment and the variability to in fact assess the fitness for purpose of our decision limit. After validation was complete, the new analytical scheme was put into work and implemented through casework. So as for any other exhibit, analysts are to sample units, either statistically or non-statistically. They are to analyze a positive control on the day of analysis, and that's the first thing to assess. And this positive control is to have a concentration of THC of 0.1 mg per mil. And the acceptance criteria for this particular control, they must see a ratio of above 1. Negative controls are also required, and then for each unit selected, they must complete the 3 tests, the microscopic, the color test, as well as the GCMS analysis. The role of the positive control is very important. This positive control contains the internal standard marker, which is our 1% marker, and it contains the tetrahydrocannabinol at double the concentration. So the expected response that the analyst should see is approximately 2 to 1. And again, remember, we do have some variability expected on that. So also monitor, we want the analyst to monitor the response of that internal standard. And the main reason for this is to monitor that your instrument is fit for purpose on the day of analysis. If the results deviate greatly from this, then there may be some maintenance needed, a liner change, or maybe a cleaning of the instrument. So it's a good thermometer to use to measure the temperature of your instrument prior to analyzing your samples. And obviously, this positive control also provides for retention time comparison as well as spectral comparison. So after we have performed the complete analytical scheme, if we have 3 positive results for our micro-macro test, the color test produces a blue color, and the GCMS results shows that that THC is above that internal standard, that sample is reported as marijuana. Any other scenario like that is reported as inconclusive, and the customer is given the option of request further analysis. So the report goes out as inconclusive, pending further analysis upon request. And just a reminder that this is again applicable to the federal jurisdiction. Different laboratories will have to look at their specific statutes of their jurisdiction for reporting purposes. This is an example of a typical marijuana exhibit. In this case, a ratio of over 25 was measured. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm trying to run through this. And these are the examples of inconclusive result. Notice that in this case, the THC ratio was below 1, but in this case, it was in fact measured above 3. But because the CBD is such a great excess, the color test was pink. Therefore, it was reported as inconclusive. This is another example of similar concentrations of THC and CBD. And we have also recently revised the analytical scheme and the GCMS method so that it could also be applied to liquids and extract. We are not using the color test for this type of analysis because a lot of these products, their matrix interfere with the colors produced by the color test. The decision on changing the sample prep was mainly based on the fact that a lot of these products are going to contain very high THC or high CBD content. And we wanted to protect our instruments from the polyethylene glycols and all the other matrix materials on this. And lucky enough, we deal with lower heterogeneity issues than the plant material because we're dealing with liquids and extract. So there are less extraction issues and as well as fewer decarboxylation issues because in fact, for a lot of these liquids and extras, what is present is the neutral species, not the acids. And this is just an example of a chromatogram of plant material where the main components are in fact the acids component, CBDA and THCA, versus a typical chromatogram of a CBD oil where there are no acids that are detected and all the species are present in their neutral form. So that's a summary of what I presented you. There's some references, and I don't want to end before thanking a lot of the people that made this possible, both in the DEA, Office of Forensic Sciences, a special testing laboratory, headquarters, and the program managers that were helped on the implementation, the DEA lab in Dallas that piloted this analytical scheme, and the Virginia folks that assist us with also corroborating and validating the methods, GCMS as well as the color test, and the Virginia Department of General Services for providing the hemp samples. And Chris and Jason, I want to thank you guys for inviting me and participating in the webinar.
All right, thank you, Sandra. So we only have a few minutes to ask some questions. We have more questions than we'll be able to get to today, but I will explain a little bit about that once we do go through some questions with our presenters. Let me just bring back my screen. All right, so Sandra, the first question I have for you is asking why didn't the DEA use denaturated Delta-9 THC as the internal standard?
Deuterated, you mean?
Yes, I apologize.
Yes. We were going to go with a chromatogram as the visual marker. Yes, deuterated compounds are the classic internal standard to be used for the ions if we were quantitating using ions in the spectrum, but that's not what we're doing. And we wanted to do something that was easily implemented throughout all of our laboratories without having to also consider the cost of obtaining deuterated reference materials.
All right, and the next question we have for you is asking, wondering if the DEA is performing, you touched on this a little bit, their THC procedure on the THC extracts and how that is going, and also if you're handling extracts, distillates, and isolates.
Yes, so we have revised. Our first SOP was for plant material, and we have since then implemented a second SOP for liquids and extract, where the few slides ago when I presented that's what the sample preparation is. This was just implemented in October. So I believe there's only about 40 plus exhibits that have been assessed, and the vast majority of them have been THC-rich materials. But from that point of view, less sample, 10 to 20 milligrams, we diluted in the 5 mils of extraction, and then we perform an additional dilution of 1 to 10. And in that case, the decision limit is not the the 1 is 0.1 THC to internal standard ratio.
All right, and let's see. The next question we have, we're going to go back to Mike. Mike, are you on the line?
I am.
All right. So we have some questions that came in for you. Would you mind discussing some of the legalities and just the way the hemp plant is working on the THC values at harvest versus months later? We posed the question first to Renee, and she kind of punted to you. The real question is, can hemp then turn into marijuana?
It's never going to turn into marijuana, but it will change subtly. You can have just the process of drying it from the field. You're going to get a more accurate result. It's not going to go up, but your THCA is all going to convert, and then you're going to have some oxidation of the CBD will oxidize into THC, and so those are all things over long periods of time. But the CBD and the THC both degrade over time. So again, if it was legal when it was in the field, you may see a decimal point, like maybe a 100th of a decimal point type change, but nothing's going to change. You're not going to see it change, go from 0.3 legal to 6.8 for marijuana.
All right, next question we have that came in. Since you technically received a controlled substance for testing, I believe you reported the THC around 2%. Did it have to be reported to law enforcement? Did the shipper have any kind of DEA license? What are the procedures when you do receive those kind of samples?
The the procedure on the concentrates, again, is real fuzzy because of the Farm Bill allowing any product made from a certified hemp program. The concentrates kind of fall into an area that they haven't touched on. And so, FedEx has come out and said they're not going to handle it because they don't want any of the confusion. The U.S. Postal Service says, yes, they'll ship any as long as it's a hemp product. And so all of that's, still going to be, figured out at some point in time.
All right. This question can kind of go to the whole group. The question is from Brandon asking, have there been any legal determinations as to what percentage of THC in the plant material actually means in forensic testing? Are we talking the whole plant, individual parts seized, using the THCA and THC added together, or are they reported separately? So Mike, if you want to jump in there first, and then anyone else, feel free to do so.
Well, we've had a few cases where we've had police will pull over a truck that's carrying hemp, and so they'll grab samples. It's not trim material; it's more a biomass type thing. And so with those, we sample a representative sample of what they bring us. We don't have the whole plant. Most of the time, they're not stored as whole plant. They're cut down to either trim bud material or biomass. And so trim bud material, of course, is the highest CBD containing, and therefore will have the higher THC. But no, it's one of those, by the letter of the law, it's based on what you have on you. And so, and those laws change from state to state as well. So I know in Texas, if you have an edible, then it's, they take the weight of the entire edible that you have. So if you had, say, a pan of brownies that has some flour material mixed in it and it's not mixed well, they grab that. The charge is based on the weight of the entire sample, as opposed to Tennessee, where they take the they look at the number of the milligrams per gram of material, and so they actually calculate based on that percentage what the amount of material there present is.
All right, Renee or Sandra, do you have anything you'd like to add to that one?
What was the original question regarding the total?
Talking about total THC, is it going to be, THCA or just THC added together, or are they reported separately?
I could attest to the quantitative methods that the full quantitation methods and platforms that we have. There will be total THC calculated the THCA plus the THC with the correction by molecular way, exactly as Mike showed it.
Okay. So Keith actually had a good question asking if the questions are going to be addressed after the course. So since we have so many questions and the information that was put out was so robust by our presenters, we are going to talk to our presenters and possibly do a follow-up roundtable discussion Q&A style webinar in the upcoming months, possibly end of March, sometime in April might be the earliest we're looking at. We're also going to be sending out a survey to everyone that has attended today, just in case your questions were not answered, or if you have any follow-up questions. We would definitely like to build a whole webinar just based around the forensic community's questions that you have regarding this subject. So that is definitely something that we're looking at. Also, we are recording today's event, so you can go back and watch it at any time. And we are also going to be providing all of the presenters' PDF versions of their slide deck that you can find back on the main page, back where you entered into the event. So Renee, this one's going to come to you. Is there any information on how much over the 0.3% of most of the quote-unquote hot crops are testing? Are they still under 1%?
I don't have any information on that. Sorry. I think USDA would be responsible for potentially compiling some of that information. There were a number of reporting requirements in the 2018 Farm Bill. but I haven't seen any information on that yet. And I think the best information would probably be from Mike and Sandra. They might have better information. Yeah.
The majority of what we've seen, of course, with Tennessee being a Delta 9 state, some people took advantage of some friendlier genetics. But even then, it's, everything's, total THC below 1. You've got some strains that are pushing that as close as they can, where you'll have a Delta 9 of 0.15% and THCA showing at about 0.4%, 0.6% would be about the highest we've seen. We have seen some people go over the limit. And again, with the genetics and the plants, what the genetics show in Colorado when you bring them out someplace in a different environment, how hot stressed they are, how water stressed they are, all of those things affect the THC. And in fact, in marijuana growth, they do a lot of things to stress the plant to push the THC up. And so any stress in the plant from transplant or from seedling all the way through transplant to final product will affect your THC values. But I would say, again, to answer, I guess, the roaming question there, no, most of the people that have grown this year have been very respectful of the 0.3 and have no desire, because, I mean, they're putting thousands of dollars per acre into the ground in hopes of harvesting. So having hot hemp come through is a nightmare for them.
All right, thank you, Renee, and thank you, Mike. Sandra, this question is coming for you. Came at the end of your talk. Do you know the reasons why all molecules of THCA are not decarboxylated? Is decarboxylation a reversible reaction?
Oh, well, no, I mean, decarboxylation, when done under controlled conditions, and I know folks in Colorado have their drying procedure, and then separately they have a decarboxylation procedure. When it happens under controlled conditions in the laboratory, you could get very high efficiency of decarboxylation. The issue, that's a different reality than what happens inside an injector on a GCMS instrument. The temperature may be high enough, but the molecules are just not long enough there to be decarboxylated. So anything that remains as a THCA is not a volatile enough species amenable for GCFID. So they're lost. And it depends also, very sensitive to liner conditions, the filling on the liner, even liner geometry. So whatever doesn't get converted, it's lost. It's not volatile, THCA.
All right, Mike, this question's coming to you. You had shown some examples of certificate analysis in your presentation. Do those have expiration dates, or do they serve the crop for a limited time or forever? How do those exactly work?
We do not put expiration dates on the certificate of analysis. Without doing the stability study, we don't know, again, that's why they're dated as to when they are tested. Again, in the industry, there's a lot of people that will be using last year's result because everything's a lot higher than, and this crop's been sitting out and exposed to weather for a year. They'll use that one from last year, and some people have called us, hey, why is this so different now? And so we've had to explain all of that aspect. And so, but no, without doing a stability studies to simulate that 1 year, 2 years, we just don't have a value to put on those.
All right. And the last question that we're going to have for today, just as I said, we have so many questions that are still rolling in, and we're going to have to cut this off for now, but we are going to plan a follow-up webinar. That's going to you, Mike, just to kind of end things up. They were wondering if the presenter would be willing to share the HPLC method, and you said that you would. I can post that in the chat.
Yeah, that's
if you
fine.
Want to kind of go over that real quick.
Yeah, we use a ResTech column. All the main manufacturers of HPLC columns will have addressed the cannabis testing, and so they all have theirs. We chose the ResTech. I like their separation. Looks great. It's very reproducible, very linear over time. But basically, it's I sent the link to you. It's a C18 column, and it's ammonium formate with formic acid, and then acetonitrile with 0.1% formic acid. And he'll be able to, we'll be able to send the link there. But no, it's a real straightforward. It's 25% aqueous, 75% acetonitrile, and a 1.5 milliminute flow. And so we get a separation of 19 cannabinoids on that.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. And with that, again, we are going to go ahead and have to close up the webinar for today. I know that we did not get everyone's questions, but if you did submit a question, we have made a log of them. We are also going to be sending out a survey to all of the attendees today for any follow-up questions that you might have for our presenters. Please feel free to go ahead and fill that out. That way we can make sure that in our follow-up webinar, we do have the questions that the forensic community is wanting to have answered by our subject matter experts. So the first thing I would like to do, obviously, is thank Renee, Mike, and Dr. Rodriguez-Cruz for joining us today, their presentations, all of the research, all of the work that they have been doing in this field. You're definitely helping us champion this field into the future. So thank you all for joining us today as presenters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Obviously, we would also like to end thanking all of our audience for joining us today. This was our largest webinar that we have ever hosted as the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending today and making that possible. You will see directly below the live feed and the closed captions, there is a survey there on the bottom right-hand side. If you could take a few moments to go through that survey, we would definitely appreciate it. This is a separate survey from what will be sent out to you tomorrow. But your feedback on our webinars is vital information that we always use just to make sure that we're providing you with the best webinar experience possible, as well as to adjust any content and the way that we disseminate that information out to you. So before you leave today, if you could take a few moments to complete that survey, we would definitely appreciate that from you. You will also find back on the main page, we do have all of our presentations in PDF form of today's webinar. There are also 2 resources that Renee has provided as well. Make sure that you do download that today before you go. That way you do have a copy. You will also find your certificate of completion for today's event there as well. We are recording today's webinar. That way we can convert it into our archival. We usually have that back up on our website in about a week. That way you can refer back to it should you need to, or pass along to any colleagues that might have missed today's live webinar. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This was a fantastic event. We hope everyone found it very useful and informative. Again, we are going to try to have a follow-up webinar with all of our presenters, and we were going to try to answer all of the questions that we can in that time. So definitely be on the lookout in our newsletter for those that will, for that information to be coming out. Tyler will be posting some links here in the chat pod shortly with links to our social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Make sure you are following us there, as well as links to our website and our podcast, where you can find all of our no-cost webinars, podcasts, reports, and success stories that we, the FTCOE, are putting out. Again, thank you, everyone, for attending. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and we really hope to see you in our next event.